Hey guys, I got a pretty cool build to show, but before that I need to talk about the Voidfletcher quiver. As always, timestamps and POB import code will be in video description. So the Voidfletcher quiver has been buffed in Betrayal League and is now much more usable than before. Basically, when you fire an arrow, it triggers the void shot, it consumes one void charge and you can have up to 5 void charges. And it regenerates void charges every 0.5 seconds. And the quiver itself does give a nice amount of cold damage to attacks. Now the void shot is almost like an explosive arrow. It is a projectile that explodes, dealing AoE damage. However, it is physical with 50% physical damage converted into cold. Void shot also has 120% base damage, which is very nice for stacking a lot of flare damage. And since it is quiver and you cannot put any support gems, stacking a bunch of flare damage and extra arrows, extra projectiles is kind of mandatory if you want to scale void shot damage. Now the damage from void shot does seem to overlap if you shoot multiple projectiles, so anything that gives extra arrows, extra projectiles would greatly benefit it. And I was using Arborix buff, and of course Dying Sun would be very nice, of course Dada Ascendancy class, and you would most likely want to fully convert physical damage into cold, get a lot of elemental damage, maybe crit if you're building crit, a lot of flare damage anywhere you can, especially from abyssal jewels. Oh, one last thing, it does seem to have cooldown, as in you can only shoot 4 void shots per second, so if you were attacking more than 4 times per second, then you would be wasting it. Increased cooldown and recovery speed should affect that cooldown, but it should not affect the void charge generation, which basically means if you shoot more than 2 times per second, you will end up running out of void charges. And of course this wouldn't be Path of Exile if it didn't have a bug or an exception to a rule. With Barrage you can actually consume all the void shots and trigger 5 void shots at once, which can be a huge damage burst. However, you still need to wait for the charge to recharge. And at first I thought that is going to be OP and broken, but after playing a bit with it, it's not really that good. You kind of need non-moving target to blow up all the 5 shots and then run around like chicken for 2 seconds to generate charges again. And kind of the only place where you can do that is Uber Elder Fight. So even if this is not a bug, I wouldn't say that it is OP anymore. But even without the Barrage, I think the quiver itself is really nice. I tested it with all the other buff skills and only Barrage had unique interaction with this quiver. So I guess let's talk about the build that I did. Now to explain why I built it this way, let me tell you a short story. So I had 6 socket Incandescent heart in my inventory for a couple weeks, and while finishing previous build I decided to throw in couple fuses, and I said to RNGesus, if you let me 6 link this body armor, I will use it for my next build. And RNGesus said okay, and like 50 fuses later I 6 linked it. So I did plan a lot what to do with this body armor, and I also really wanted to play with Voidfletcher, and for some reason I wanted to play with Shrapnel shot. Shrapnel shot shoots arrows and also does the cone attack in front of you, and with 2 threshold jewels you can double the damage from the cone attack. So the build began, and it was actually very pleasant to play with it. This is a Scion Pathfinder Juggernaut. Flask Finder is obviously very nice to maintain your flask charges, and Jugger for extra accuracy, stun immunity, chill immunity, and also some defensive layers in terms of endurance charges. And from the moment I equipped Voidfletcher quiver, it really felt great. I have a short clip here showing just the damage from void shot. My barrage was only on a free link and linked with brutality so that I would even lower my overall DPS, because 90% of my damage is elemental. And I was around level 80 running this map, and this map had elemental resistances, haste resistance, and endurance charges, which also increases elemental resistances even more. And I was using barrage to blow up all the void shots at once, and even so the damage was still pretty impressive. As you can see, mapping is a bit annoying with the barrage because you blow up all the shots at once and enemies move, so it often doesn't hit those enemies. So I went back to using Shrapnel shot, and I was using Shrapnel shot all the way until level 88. I did some fully powered up red tier maps and it was going really alright, but I decided to try it with Scourge arrow, and to no one's surprise, Scourge arrow is great. I did however had to keep tapping it because it would just channel and not even shoot void shots until I release it, but the Scourge arrow makes mapping so much better. And I don't need those 2 threshold jewels anymore, so I can use jewels with damage and life. So at level 88 I did attempt red tier elder, tier 14. Oh, by the way, Mirage Archer does not proc void shots. Then I did couple of Shaper's Guidance. It wasn't that fast, like nothing too amazing, but considering that a big part of my damage comes from Voidfletcher, I would say it was pretty alright. Then the Shaper went pretty smoothly, basically deathless. So overall the build performed really well, but it is not cheap. Because I used Incandescent's Heart, I had to get 75% Chaos Resistance. And the only time when you mitigate elemental damage with Incandescent's Heart is when you are using Chaos Inoculation, and you are basically immune to Chaos damage. And I'm live based version, so I had to get a lot of Chaos Resistance, which means I had to sacrifice a couple items which could give me damage, and I had to get expensive items, because Chaos Resistance with other good stats like life and other resistances is pretty expensive. However, Incandescent's Heart does give quite a lot of damage, and it also does give attack damage leech as life. Another drawback is that, well, kind of a drawback is that your light radius is based on energy shield. So if the map is like in the cave, you will be basically running in the darkness. Many of the times I would just run straight into middle of the enemy pack and would just die. I would not see the enemy pack in time. But you don't have that issue when running outdoor maps. For my weapon I decided to use Arborix bow, which does give extra 2 arrows, which does work for Voidfletcher. And no, Reach of the Council would not give extra arrows for Voidfletch. Also, Arborix bow does have a rotational buff. In short, that buff does give you more DPS. And every 8 seconds you become chrome and shiny. But if you take Iron Reflex from the passive skill tree, you will always be chrome and shiny. And you will always deal 30% more damage with arrows against close range targets. By the way, on the Voidfletcher quiver it would be very nice to get point blank Corruption implicit, which saves me 4 points on the passive skill tree. Next, for the helmet I decided to use Crown of the Tyrant, which isn't that expensive anymore, and with this helmet it lowers nearby enemies all resistances including Chaos, since I am dealing quite a lot of Chaos damage as well. And I picked a green socket for more cold damage. Gloves, 1 socket Tombfist, put on some Murderous Eye inside it to get Intimidate on enemies. Belt, crafted with fossils. It could be expensive, I wanted more damage so I had to craft it with elemental damage with attacks. And I also hit generic elemental damage increase, with some resistances and life. I was using Prismatic Fossil, Etheric Fossil and Frigid Fossil. Getting enough resistances was really a pain in the butt, or should I say a pain in my wallet. Boots with a lot of elemental resistance and Chaos resistance and movement speed. Both rings with quite a lot of life, some certain resistances, some damage, and also crafted the hybrid Chaos resistance mod. Amulet, life, some damage, certain resistances, elemental damage with attacks and more Chaos resistance. I even have Chaos resistance on one of the Abyss Jewels, and on Abyss Jewels I did try to get life and some damage, mostly elemental damage with bows. Accuracy and attack speed can also be nice. And for flask, I am using this time only 1 life flask, because Pathfinder makes it easy to maintain your flash charges, so I do feel comfortable enough to run just 1 life flask this time. Next I do have Atziri's Promise to top up my Chaos resistance and to get more damage. Then Taste of Hate, because I wanted a bit more mitigation and it does give damage. And also Sulfur Flask to remove curse and also give a bit more damage. And lastly of course Quicksilver Flask. Now for skills and links inside my body armor I have Scourge Arrow linked with Mirage Archer, quality important because it gives attack speed, then elemental damage with attacks, added fire damage, vicious projectiles, and faster attacks with quality. It is pretty hard to roll green sockets on this body armor, so I was kind of lucky to roll 4 greens and then 2 reds which I wanted. But if you roll blue you could also use other lighting damage. Now in Path of Building attack speed support is not really that great, but it is because you can proc more void shots. At least it was, I just checked, and I do attack more than 4 times per second with Scourge Arrow. Even without faster attacks I still cap at over 4 attacks per second, which is enough to proc a maximum amount of void shots per second. But anyway, it does make it feel smoother. Next I do have Herald of Ice in the helmet. In the gloves I have Phase Run linked with increased duration and Val Lighting Trap. In my boots I have level 1 cast and damage taken linked with Cold Snap, Enfeeble and Bone Chill. It does give me a bit of damage when I take the damage and mitigates the damage, well, after I taken the damage, which usually doesn't protect me against one shots. And in the bow I have Blink Arrow linked with faster attacks and Culling Strike, but I never really benefited from the Culling Strike, so you don't have to use that. And then Blood Rage and Hatred. Now the passive skill tree, and it's kind of a bit annoying to be a Scion, because once you do Uberlap you have to refund quite a lot of points. I did take Pathfinder and Juggernaut, and from Uberlap connected to the path of the Ranger and disconnected a path between, well, this path. Also, I would highly recommend getting phase aggro as soon as possible. I did feel pretty squishy until I started using that and cast on damage taken and feeble. And then I rushed a bit down to get a bit of mana leech through the life nodes and to convert physical damage into cold, taking Winter Spirit. Of course, also branching to the left to getting Elemental Overload, more life, more damage, and moving up to the shadow area to get the life nodes and attack damage leech as life, and then finishing off by getting the bow nodes and the bottom one elemental damage nodes. If you need more haste resistance, you can get Purity of Flesh above the Templar area. But then again, I don't know if I would even recommend using Incandescent Heart. And I did not go for the crit because it would be too difficult to balance everything, but it is possible to make it as a crit build using Elder's crit body armor, but of course the passive skill tree would look completely different. And of course I'm getting a bunch of jewel sockets, because you can get a lot of damage from jewels, especially for the Voidfletcher. So that basically covers this build. My next build is going to be using Bitterbind Point Shield, running Spectres and self-casting spell, most likely Flame Surge. And yes, I will try out Vanguard Spectres with the Scorching Ray Totems. So for now, thank you for watching and I'll see you soon.